where I sit, having been in all the sessions, it's amazing to see that there are some common themes that are continuing to rise throughout the discussion. And one of them is really the importance of role modeling and mentoring. That's been brought up, I think, in almost all of the sessions. But I mean, also some really important points there around bias and discrimination. And I like the phrase assertiveness penalty. Really nice point there as well. And thanks so much, Jackie, for that great advice. Merci beaucoup also to our great interpreters, Helene and Isabel. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I wish we had more time. Rebby, the points that you raised are fantastic, and I think we need to make sure we keep them up in the air. We don't let them drop. We truly appreciate all your commitment and your time you've taken to be with us today. I know that many of you online, like me, have a whole bunch of questions that we just couldn't fit in. But don't worry, it's just the start of interesting discussions. Please do feel free to reach out to our ICRISAT colleagues to continue the conversations after today's event. And on that note, we know that time is advancing, so it's time to move on to ILRI. If you are just joining us, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you're joining us from. You're very welcome to this Marathon Spotlight event, which is taking us on a 13-hour journey around the world. Today, as people are celebrating the International Day of Women and Girls in Science, we're taking the opportunity to celebrate our own fantastic community of women researchers and scientists. Women who are leading the way in a wide range of innovation, breaking barriers, finding new ways to advance the transformation of food, land, and water systems in climate crisis. If we haven't had the chance to meet before, hello, my name is Fiona Farrell, and I lead CGIR's function that works to advance gender equity, diversity, and inclusion in our global workplaces, or GDI for short. We launched the GDI in late January 2020, so we've just very recently celebrated our first birthday. We have a very clear mission. Our mission is to work with leadership, management, and staff across CGIR to ensure that our workplaces really are truly enabling and inclusive for our over 10,000 people. Our goal is to ensure that diversity in all its dimensions is embraced, and that everybody in our workforce is supported to reach their full potential. For us, it's not only the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. We know that diversity can bring the different perspectives and the innovation we need in order to deliver on our critical mission. The work of the GDI function is guided by our GDI framework and action plan. If you'd like to learn more about these important documents or our knowledge hub, our guides or our matrix, which holds us accountable for delivery on the goals we've set, then you can go to the GDI webpage and you can see the details up there on the screen right now. Among many of the initiatives that we've had the honor of supporting in 2020, one of them was the launch of a new employee-led resource group called WIRES, Women in Research and Science. And WIRES brings together all those in our global community who seek to support our incredible women researchers and scientists, providing them with a supportive, safe place to meet and to learn and to grow. And today's event follows on very closely from their official launch on the 21st of January. Today we're going to recognize the significant contributions of women scientists by showcasing a sample of their exciting and innovative work. And as we continue our 13-hour journey, we remind you of a few housekeeping rules, as you can see on the screen. We invite you to submit your questions and your comments via the Q&A box. And you can reach out to Thomas if you have any technical difficulties. We also invite you to join WIRES using the contact details on the right-hand side. And with all of that, it is now my great pleasure to welcome the speakers for our 5th Power Hour today, which is being hosted by ILRI. Handing over to you now, Emily.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. So I welcome our facilitator for our session, Tsehai, to take us through the process. Thank you. Over to you, Tsehai.
Okay, thank you so much, Emily, and welcome everyone to our session. We have a very lively and engaging session. Please stay with us. I really like Fiona's word to power hour with us. Thank you so much. So ILRI's mission is to improve food and nutritional security and to reduce poverty in developing countries through livestock research, through ensuring better lives through livestock. So let me quickly introduce you also after I said our mission, our agenda for today. Shortly, I will introduce our Deputy Director General of Integrated Science to give us opening remark. Following that, we have 4 women scientists who is going to share with us their insights and lessons in this live. And then after that, we have a moderated Q&A. At the end, we summarize the session and close. This is in short our agenda. Please stay with us with your full energy. Thank you so much. Without further ado, let me kindly invite Ian Wright, ILRI's Deputy Director General for Integrated Science, for opening remark. Over to you, Ian.
Thank you very much, Tsehai. And I'm really very pleased to introduce and welcome you to this next session of the WIRE's webinar, brought to you by ILRI. I joined the launch of WIRE last month. I was so impressed by the thought and the hard work that had gone into that initiative. And I was also impressed and really inspired by what all the participants said at that event. Now, this 13-hour webinar, and it's also been referred to a marathon, and it certainly is a marathon lasting 13 hours, is an opportunity for us to celebrate the International Day of Women and Girls in Science. And I think it's a fantastic idea. So I really want to congratulate Fiona and the whole team that were involved in coming up with this great idea and making it happen. As I say, I think it's a fantastic opportunity to hear from the many women scientists across the 13 CGR centers around the world, from Malaysia to Mexico. It's an opportunity to hear about the work, the experiences, the challenges, achievements, aspirations, and thoughts of our women scientists. And, you know, looking back over the 14 years that I've been in the CGIAR and with ILRI, I can see quite a bit of progress in advancing the cause of women in science. I can recall 14 years ago going to meetings where there would be 70 or 80 men in the room and 1 or 2 women. That doesn't happen so often these days, but it still happens occasionally, and we need to be aware of that. And while it's great to see that our new executive management team has 2 women and 1 man, we do have a challenge at the next level down in the CGIAR. If you look at our DGs, our Deputy Directors General, of which I'm one, our CRP directors, there is a real lack of diversity in that group, not just from a gender perspective, but in many other dimensions of diversity. And I think that is both a challenge and potentially an impediment to the future of the one CGIAR that needs serious consideration. Now, coming back nearer home in ILRI, about 39% of our staff are women, 44% of our directors, 38% of our middle managers, and 42% of those in professional roles. So we still have some way to go in achieving full gender balance in ILRI as across the rest of the CGIAR. So how can we improve? Well, the CGR Gender Diversity Inclusion Framework is, I think, a great start. And here in ILRI, we've established our own Gender Diversity and Inclusion Task Force, drawn from across the staff of the Institute. I'm on it, representing senior management, but as I say, it draws from across the Institute. And we're taking the CGR GDI framework and customizing that for our use in ILRI, and then developing an implementation plan to roll that out, to build on and hopefully accelerate the what we've been doing in the past few years. And I think there are issues, of course, that apply to all staff, not just women scientists. We need to look very carefully at the whole life cycle of employment in the CGIAR, from recruitment to orientation, career development, promotion, work-life balance, family-friendly policies, and so on, and so on, and so on. And in addition, for women scientists, we need to ensure that we're providing an environment and the support through which women scientists can achieve their full potential and contribute fully to the CGIAR and to our mission. And we've heard of many of the things that we can do. Mentoring and role models has come up a lot in the conversations in the last few hours. So I'm looking forward to this session. We will be hearing from 4 of our women scientists, Ekta, Renee, Rupture, and Leah, over the course of the next 50 minutes or so. And I'm looking forward to it, and I hope you enjoy the session. Thank you very much. Back to you, Sahai.
Okay, thank you so much, Ian, and also for highlighting how we are empowered in ILRI. We're really empowered. Thank you so much for that. Now let me introduce my first speaker. Ekta Patel has a PhD in molecular and cellular biology. As a joint scientist and communications manager, she is currently overseeing communications for Biosciences Directorate at ILRI, as well as carrying out research on antimicrobial resistance at the Wild Livestock Environmental Interface through the One Health Center in Africa and the CGR AMR Hub. She has research experience in understanding how genes drive drug resistance mechanisms, developing vaccine and diagnostic for livestock disease. Let me now at this point kindly invite Ekta to share her lessons and some of her experience with us. Ekta, over to you.
Thank you, Sahai. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak about this. I'm going to begin by sharing a little bit about the science that I do. And I'm going to start with antimicrobial resistance. Common infections and injuries that were once easily treated are now becoming dangerous. And this is because drug-resistant infections caused by drug-resistant bacteria have started to undermine modern medicine. Nearly a century ago, 1928, Alexander Fleming identified penicillin, a wonder drug, which now no longer works. And this is mainly because drugs have been inappropriately used. And to date, AMR, which is considered a silent pandemic, is causing nearly over 700,000 deaths per year. At the CGIAR AMR Hub, we aim to gather evidence on the presence of resistance genes at the wildlife-livestock interface, which may be acting as reservoirs for resistant bacteria. Many of you are there we have collaborators with the World International Water Management, World Fish, as well as IFRI. Next slide, please. This is a broad overview. What I would like to share here is, as a communications manager, one of the things I enjoy is bridging the gaps between what it is that we do in the lab and what is being shared in the public domain. This slide shows you various outputs, and they range from animal health diseases like African swine fever to sort of the wealth of genetic access through our biorepositories, to understanding technical details about diagnostic tests for COVID-19. So one of the things I get to do is have a bird's eye view of the content. And if you look at that article in the middle, which is highlighted in sort of blue, I was able to take sort of an integrated approach to link the feed and forage program to the Sustainable Livestock Systems program and demonstrate how good quality grass, which is better for climate, can improve livestock productivity. And this was picked up by Dutch Welle, Germany's international broadcaster and media outlets. So I look forward to continuing working at the interface of science and communications. Thank you, Sahai.
Thank you, Ekta. At this point, I would like to also mention for our audience, if you have any questions, comments for our speakers, please use the chat box to do that. Emily will help me to aggregate that. Now Ekta will come back to you with some questions. Now let me pass to my second speaker. Let me introduce Renee Bullock is working a gender Renee Bullock is working as a gender environmental scientist. She has a PhD in geography from the University of Florida. Her primary focus is in gender and use issue in the environment, including climate adaptation and sustainable intensification. Having lived and worked in Sub-Saharan Africa for over 10 years, she initiated a project that supported the creation of women's groups that are still active to build capacity in business and savings in Democratic Republic of Congo. At this point, let me invite Renee to share her experience and lessons with us. It's over to you, Renee.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you. So I'd like to talk briefly about a research project that we conducted in ILRI, focusing on youth and trying to understand their opportunity spaces in dairy in Kenya. So youth are usually defined in Kenya as being aged 18 to 34. However, this category doesn't reveal very much about the different opportunities and constraints that young women and men face. So we used a geographic perspective as well as a relational perspective that really tries to understand young people and the relations that they're embedded in, and an intersectional approach, which looks not just at age and gender, but how age, gender, and ethnicity intersect and might influence young people's opportunities in dairy. So some of our findings were that young women in rural areas are especially constrained, mainly because of norms and practices in the community and in the household. And this limits their ability to profit from dairy in the household and also to participate in value chains because of some of the mobility constraints that they face. So additionally, relationships are very important. Relationships with their parents, with their spouses, but also young people's engagement in cooperatives is something that's important, but also usually has tension because of some issues between younger and older people. Sometimes there are some issues and disagreements, but youth groups were found to be very, very supportive of young people's agency in dairy. And lastly, young people also are very agentic and making changes and paving the way for themselves in a lot of different ways than previous generations. So one of those ways is through interethnic marriages and also just being open to trying out different things. So not subscribing to more traditional gender roles. Next slide, please. Secondly, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of our kind of creative ways to engage youth in the process and also to encourage using innovative ways to engage young people in whatever research is being done. So we incorporated some capacity building activities. Some of those included sponsoring their attendance to an important dairy conference that was being held, and this was a way that they could gain exposure to private sector and also some academic presentations and information out there. We also supported workshops to encourage peer-to-peer learning because young people themselves are very active in dairy. They have all kinds of different positions and services. It might be in production, it's in veterinary, AI, many different skill sets that they can share with each other, which is very important and helpful in advancing their own movement through different pathways in dairy. And also we invited extension officers to share their expertise with the young people that we were interviewing. So taking advantage of social media is always great, creating WhatsApp groups that can expand their networks with each other. And last but not least, the use of multimedia and promoting the voices of youth, especially in policy, because oftentimes young people's voices are not actually heard in the policies that are created around them. So there are a few videos on ILRI YouTube, and the annual ILRI's annual report also features different stories about gender and livestock using a multimedia and very innovative and nice approach. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Renee. Again, we'll come back to you with some question and maybe some question from participants' comments later on. Thank you so much. Let me pass to my third speaker, Rupture Banerjee, working as a scientist, has a PhD Science, Technology, and Cognition at the International Livestock Research Institute. She works on evaluating delivery and business models for scaling technology, including gender dimension for innovation. She has been leading institutional and community need for drought risk financing solution assessments for the dryland of Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, Senegal, Sudan, and Somalia. Let me invite at this point Rupture to share her experience with us. Rupture, over to you.
Thanks a lot, Sahai. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody from wherever you are joining. Today, I would like to talk a little bit about the institutional drivers of innovation in the drylands. The reason being is that institutions form an integral part in implementing and scaling of technologies. And most often than not, the institutional process, the importance of that is often overlooked and not treated really as a science. Having the ability, I consider that of having playing a bridging role between research and implementation. Myself and my team have been able to mainstream the role of institutional innovations at the public, private, and the community level in getting a technology like the index-based livestock insurance to some of the remotest parts of Ethiopia and Kenya, while now scaling it to the other parts of the Horn and the Sahel. Just to highlight some of the examples, was coming up with innovative service delivery mechanisms through the use of community shops and women fodder groups as agents to sell ILRI to the pastoralists. Some of the techniques that we've also used to build the capacity of these agents in these remote areas is using of digital learning tools like M-learning platforms. Besides ILRI being adopted at the national level as a social safety net program, we have been also working with the government on introducing citizen-based innovations in collecting market information in the pastoral areas. This might seem as a digital innovation, but the mechanics to get this digital innovation to the community requires research on different institutional models and designs that can actually enable such adoption. One of the achievements that I think I'm pretty proud of is that we have also been able to identify very key institutional drivers of change within the program or the project itself, and which we feel that some of them can be used as guidelines for our research for development agenda that ILRI as well as the CG in general pursues. It's with pride that I say that we are now in the process of standardizing a methodology for institutional assessments for feasibility studies for drought risk financing solutions as we scale to different parts of the continent. This now includes an understanding ways to increase the value proposition of this insurance product to the pastoralist through the possibility of bundling different kind of essential services that the pastoralists often are denied or they don't have access to. But what I would like to say as I conclude my talk is that the impact of technology is often as a result of institutional arrangements, and one of the classic examples is of the Green Revolution, which made a country food secure, not just because of its technology, but because of the institutional frameworks that were put in place to enable its uptake. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rupture. Again, we'll come back to you with some questions. Let me pass to introduce my last speaker now. Leah Semeka is a Capacity Development Manager at ILRI. She works in the Capacity Development Unit where she manages ILRI's fellowship program. She supports fellow and students coming to ILRI to undertake research and guides the process for fellows to fully utilize their potential through various technical and soft skills training. Over to you now, Leah. Leah has a different format. It comes with video. Oh, we have to play the video, I think, first. Emily?
Yes.
Good.
So thank you, Sehai, for that introduction. Hello, everyone from wherever you're logged in. Welcome to this session that ILRI is presenting. So as Sehai says, I work in the Capacity Development Unit, and the unit supports fellows who come to ILRI to do their research. This is a special class of researchers because they're early career researchers and they're research implementers. So just to say a bit more about what we do, please enjoy the video.
Leah, has it finished? It
Yes,
is
please.
kind of a stop. Is it finished?
Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you so much. I think at this point, let me invite all my speakers to put on your videos. We are going to do some Q&A session with you. In the meantime, Emily, you can also see if the audience have any question for our speakers. You can aggregate and I'll give a chance at the end. Leah, let me start with you. As you're, I am really excited about some of the program going on in CapDev in motivating and empowering these young women, especially the fellow program. Let me ask you, what would be your recommendation do you have for this young women trying to get into science, as you have many interaction with these students? Over to you, Leah.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you for that question, Sehai. Yes, so what I would advise young women and girls getting into science would be that, what are they passionate about? What drives them? When they sleep and wake up and look around the environment, what excites them? Because that would be one way of them identifying what area of science would they be interested in or they wish to get into. Is it animals that they are passionate about? Is it plants? Do they enjoy looking at, is it IT that drives them? So I would advise that they look into their passion, what they really like, because that would be playing into their strengths. Another idea or point I would like to share is that, integrated sciences, as opposed to the traditional biosciences. Currently, we know also integrated sciences are known as sciences. So, traditionally we hear about, I want to become a doctor, an engineer, but there is also an option for doing economics as a science, gender studies as a science. So with all this, we give girls and women an opportunity to undertake what they're really passionate about. Over to you, Tsahai.
Thank you. Is someone speaking? Thank you. Thank you, Leah. Let me move to Renee. I was following your presentation, what you did with these young girls, young women. So as a woman scientist, what is our role in supporting young women in science? Could you say something about that?
Sure. It's also, I've heard it in a few other presentations and a few other women were saying this, the importance of mentoring young women. So further to that, I'd like to say that sometimes we do have to go the extra mile to look for women to fill certain positions. We have to sometimes, I think when we are looking in the hiring process, maybe sometimes advertising or looking in places that aren't commonly advertised in. So trying to attract young women and also investing in young women, investing in their capacities to pursue science and to be, I think that young women should also be assertive and to feel that they can go ahead in spite of whatever odds there may be that seem to be against them or any kind of discouragement. Young women should really just go for it. So, and lastly, it's important that young women also join supportive networks, find the mentors, include them in networks that we have and help advance them in their pursuit in science. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Renee. Sometimes some people we have some models in our life who inspired us to be where we are with today. Let me ask Rupsha this question. Rupsha, has anyone in particular inspired you or supported you, and how did that help get you to where you are today?
Thanks, Sahai. Well, I would say that there have been several people. Of course, there's at the personal level and as well as the professional level. I would like to say that my mother was the one who really inspired me to get into a PhD and get a PhD, because she thought that that is like the true mark of an academic and scientist, for people to take you seriously. And that was her dream, which she couldn't, as being the time and the circumstances she was in. But in addition to that, I think a person who inspired me and really supported me to be where I am, like for example, sitting in the continent of Africa and doing a lot of work which I truly believe and feel very proud of and passionate about, is my father. I think it's very important that fathers are also recognized to an extent, because especially from a country that I come from, where the girl child is not often given the kind of privilege and the kind of benefits that usually a boy child is given and the kind of motivation that a boy child is given. My father has been somebody who has been my greatest champion, I would say. For him, I am like the superstar. So for as far as he's concerned, I changed the world. And I think that kind of support and that kind of relentless encouragement to follow your dreams is something that has really inspired me to be where I am. In the professional space, I think one of the reasons why I feel so passionately about institutions is that in my early stages of my career, when I was working in India, I think a lot of places I realized that a lot could be done, because if there were some institutional frameworks which were in place, or the ones that were there were working properly. And the fact that that's when I realized that at least if I could make a difference and come up with something that is logical and practical, it could make a difference. So I think these have been my inspirations in doing whatever I'm doing right now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Nice story. Ekta, let me move to you. You are the unicorn here, wearing two hats. Usually as scientists, they don't wear the comms hat. So let me ask you this question, as we are also in change in the 1CGR. As a woman in science, now I'm talking to your science hat, not the comms one. As a woman in science, what are some of the things you would like to see differently as we reform into 1CGR?
Sahai, thanks. That's a great question. I think that the reform to the 1CGIAR by the Executive Management Committee cannot be an easy one. But as Ian mentioned earlier today, that we've got two women, Claudia Seidhoff and Kundavi Kadreshan, steering that ship. So I am comforted as we move into these uncharted waters. I do hope that as we decide to take this integrated approach to achieve greater impact through the 1CGIAR, that as women in science, I feel like we should all be able, from the different CG centers, that we all start coming together and we start identifying scientific synergies to bridge these gaps so that we're not working in silos and build on our portfolios. Earlier this morning, I heard a scientist, Rose Basita, I think, from Zambia, and she's from World Fish, and she works on applications of genetic tools for aquaculture. And I thought that would be really interesting to know if, any of the livestock genetic tools can cut across some of the things that they may be doing. So I really encourage everybody to look to work towards collaborating. And then just in closing, I think we've been hearing since early this morning that even UNESCO have identified that less than 30% of the world's researchers are women. And women in STEM fields are paid less for their research and do not progress as far as men do in their careers. So I really hope that 1CGIAR is able to use this gender lens and is able to recognize variations and hopefully balance the playing field for women in science. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ekta. Emily, I think let's hear your voice at this stage. Is there any questions or comments, feedback from audience to our speakers?
Right, I see one comment from someone. I don't know whether it was meant for our speakers, but I'll go ahead and read it. It says, kindly, could you tell us about the gender projects of water use efficiency and crop productivity in the arid and semi-arid areas to mitigate drought stress? So I think it would be nice maybe for Rede and Rupture to highlight some of the livestock related projects that also touch on gender, particularly in the arid and semi-arid areas, though of course the person who asked was talking about crops. Over to you.
Renee, can you go first?
Yeah, sure. Well, there are quite a few projects in participatory rangeland management with Fiona Flinton. I'm not very certain of some specific water efficiency projects, but I know that we have a few projects in drylands that have gender as a key feature in governance. So I would refer somebody to look at some of sustainable livestock systems, look at the website and see what kinds of information there might be, or publications or resources that there might be specific to water efficiency. I know there's quite a bit of work going on with looking at communal grazing and some of these governance structures. Over to Rupsha.
Thanks, Renee. Well, some of the projects I think that are going on, which also deal with a little bit of crop productivities under the USAID funded accelerated value chain development program. That's a joint project between ILRI, ICRISAT, SIP, and sorry, I forget one more institution, and they have been working, and actually we have been working because we have been also a part of it. We have been working with the county governments and then local institutions, locally based, but also international bodies such as IIRR, in promoting small businesses for women, and also in promoting drought tolerant crops in these areas. So some of the counties that are being covered are Isiolo, Marsabit, Wajir, and I think Turkana. Yes, thank you.
So there is another question from the chat, from the Q&A. So working on livestock, with some livestock species being seen as more women or men specific, how does that affect your work as women scientists? We know that some of the species are considered livestock for men, and some livestock for women. So how does that affect your work as women scientists? Over. We could start with Ekta and go around.
Emily, to be honest, it doesn't quite affect what we do at the molecular level, but I think there's something interesting that we could say. For example, if I was going to take antimicrobial resistance and buying and using of drugs to treat livestock, for example, I think we need to get down to understanding the gender norms. Who's looking after the livestock? Is it men or women? Who's going to buy the drugs? So when we try and get some of these intervention assays done, or intervention points, it would be very critical to know some of this. Thanks.
Emily, if you would like to add on what Ekta said for this question. Renee or Rupsha, yeah.
I think I can go first. If I have to give the example of ILRI, it doesn't, in that sense, it doesn't dramatically affect our work as scientists. But yes, what we have seen since the time probably ILRI has been in existence is that there has always been a higher proportion of women who tend to buy the insurance as compared to the men. One of the theories that we have is that because they usually own the small ruminants, and they can also use that they can also insure them, and whatever they get, they can also use it as part of their household, the payouts they can use for their household needs, and also for looking after the livestock, because generally they are the ones who look after the livestock. What it has compelled us to start thinking about is that some of the targeting that we do, not just in terms of the beneficiaries, but also the messaging, and also in terms of the capacity development, or some of the access to services. How can we do it better focused on with a better focus on gender, and not just between the difference between men and women, but even within the women, the intra-gender dynamics. How do we understand that? And then based on that, how do we actually make our service delivery better, so to speak? Thank you.
Okay, Renee would like to add?
Yeah, perhaps I could pick up from here. Let me start my video. Yeah, I think that this is an important question, and it also leads into some of the work of ILRI that's gender responsive or gender transformative. So we do recognize, and we do try to investigate what are some of the gender roles around certain livestock species. Some projects are developed to, say, for example, support women's access to and ownership of chickens, which tends to be more of a common trend that we see in East Africa. But then there are also opportunities to learn about the norms and try to change some of those norms through, say, sheep fattening kinds of projects in Ethiopia that help to just shift the norms, so that even though certain cattle or certain species may be specifically for men or for women, we work to encourage changes in those kinds of patterns. So as a woman scientist, it can mean sometimes going out in the field, maybe somebody doesn't really see you as being really a very knowledgeable person on a particular species because you're a woman. And I think these are cases that these can just be learning and kind of knowledge sharing experiences that we can say, well, actually my gender doesn't limit me from knowing something about a particular species. So those are also opportunities for learning and cross-cultural exchange.
Okay, thanks, Renee. Emily, are there any?
There isn't another one, but I have a special question to Renee, because her background is very special. She started with biology and then did geography, and she's ended up as a gender scientist. So Renee, maybe you can share with us your story a little bit. What motivated you to move from biology to geography, eventually to gender, so to speak?
That's great, thanks. Well, I did long have a dream of living and working in Africa, and it was mostly motivated, to be honest, by National Geographic videos and seeing these landscapes and animals. But I was in Peace Corps, and then it really changed my understanding of people's livelihoods in rural areas, maybe where there was limited electricity or sources of water. So it shifted. I had the biology degree before that, and then I shifted to social sciences. And then through some of my experiences also in Peace Corps, living very close to and with other families, I could see these gender roles very clearly. Women working some long hours, preparing food. So yeah, it exposed me to some of the gender roles. And then in my graduate schooling, I also had quite a few experiences in Tanzania and saw some real gender differences that really motivated an interest in trying to learn about them, and also to try to help make things easier, I think, for women where possible. And DRC was also a very informative time and very quite intense in learning more about gender and gender-based violence in particular. So all of these experiences have really shaped my understanding and really my motivation to do something related to gender and now with youth. Yeah, thank you. If you hear gurgles, there's a little baby here, so it's not my stomach. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So we'll take one more from the chat. ILRI is increasingly working with gender equality as an end goal, with livestock seed as a pathway towards women empowerment. So being a woman scientist, how does that help or constrain your work? So I'll throw it out there. Whoever wants to tackle it, please go on.
Emily, I can go ahead. I think I'll share a little bit to say that I think it helps our work. I think we're bridging more and more gaps to identify what's going on in the field, and looking at sort of what the differences are, allowing us as scientists to rework the way, change the way maybe we're working, or change the narrative in sort of developing our questions as we address some of these scientific issues.
Thank you. Anyone wants to add on? Okay. All right.
Emily, let me ask one question, as I see we have little time. Let me ask one of them to answer this question. ILRI is increasing working with gender equality as an end goal, with livestock seen as a pathway towards women empowerment. Being a woman scientist, how does that help or constrains your work? Who could take this? I would like you to comment on this. Renee, can you say something about this? Okay. It's okay, Emily.
Yeah, sure. It's an important question, and I think there's a lot of research looking in at ILRI and gender researchers looking into trying to understand how livestock is a pathway towards empowerment. So, yeah, it's important to understand the role of livestock in livelihoods and how women might use them as potential insurance And yeah, this is an important area of work in ILRI. And somebody else wants to follow?
Okay, thank you. I think before I hand over to you, Emily, if Ian is still on the call, I would like him to comment from what he heard, and then I will pass it to you. Ian, are you with us? Thank you. I would like you to comment.
Okay, thanks very much, Sehai. So it was great to hear from the four of you on the work that you're doing and how gender impacts on that. I think that, from some of the questions, there were questions around, what is different in terms of livestock compared with other areas of agricultural research around the fact that some livestock species are more associated with women, that women tend to be more associated with looking after them. Whether they own them or not is another matter, but it's more about control over the resources and the assets and how that impinges on what we do at ILRI. And I think that is, that's partly why at ILRI we've got one of the highest proportion of scientists working in gender in the CGIAR. IFPRI may have slightly more, but in terms of other centres, we have more emphasis on gender in our research than perhaps some other centres have, because of the way in which the dynamics between livestock and women's issues interplay. And I think that has also had an impact on the way that we think about gender in the workplace. I know that there are some, there's a lot of debate about the distinction between gender in the workplace and gender in the research that we do. I do see them as separate, but I do see some common threads that run through that. So I think the way that we think about our gender research has influenced the way that we think about gender in the workplace at ILRI as well. Although, as I say, they are slightly different issues with some common threads running through. So I think that's important. Listening to this discussion, I was reminded of a video that I first saw in 2009, and I've put the link in the chat. It was premiered, if I can use that word, at a CGR meeting in Beijing. I think it was produced by Vicky Wild, who was then the director of what was then called the CGR Gender and Diversity Program. It's still available on YouTube, and if you go to the chat, I've put the link. It's one of the most inspirational videos I've seen about women in science. Not only women in science, when I saw it, it reminded me of why I became an agricultural scientist. And sometimes, when you're in senior management positions, you have to be reminded of that when you get bogged down in the politics of research. So I would really encourage you all to look at the chat, take a note of the link to YouTube, and watch that video about a young girl's journey from a schoolgirl to an agricultural scientist. Thanks very much, Sehai.
Thank you so much, Ian. Emily, I think at this point, let me hand over to you to summarize the day for us and also to close. Thank you. Over to you, Emily.
Thank you very much, Sehai, and all the speakers. So I'll just summarize some key take-home messages, what I had from the session that we've just heard. One of them is that some centers have made considerable progress in advancing the cause of women in science, though there's still some strides to be made. Of course, the importance of mentorship and role modeling. And when you're talking mentorship and role modeling, it's not just women, but men also need to be included. Of course, Ekta talked, it was Rupture who talked about the importance of having her father, strengthen her, encourage her to move on. So we see more and more the importance of men actually to build women scientists. And then, of course, the other one is around the institutional issues that still need to be given some limelight and some follow-up. The need to enhance diversity and gender equality, particularly in the workplace. Of course, Ian mentioned the importance of providing an environment that is supportive to women scientists. So that is very, very key. So with that, I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the panelists and of course the audience, of course also our Deputy Director General Research, Dr. Ian Wright. So thank you so much. And with that, I hand over to Fiona. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Emily. Are you sure you want to give us these 6 minutes? If so, we will take them. I think so. Thank you so much. Thanks to Ekta, to Renee, to Rupture, to Leah, to Sahai, to Ian, to Emily for just a really enjoyable and enlightening session. It was fabulous. You took the words out of my mouth, really, Emily, in summarizing some of that areas. I mean, for me, one of the other key things that came through was really around, you know, growing the next generation of women researchers and scientists. The common theme that we're getting throughout you know, the hours that we're together, which is around making sure that we have the right guidance and support in all its forms, in all of the ways that it's needed to help our fabulous women scientists find their passion and advance well. I mean, one of the other things that was really interesting for me to hear was the opportunities that an event like this provides for people across disciplines to meet one another and hear what other people are doing, because that really opens doors for collaboration across disciplines and in other areas. So thanks so much, Ekta, for bringing that up. And if anybody on the line needs contact details for people to reach one another, well, you know where to find us. We'll be happy to make all the introductions. Thanks so much, Ian, for sharing ILRI's commitment. It was lovely to hear just how far you're going and how much you're doing. And a special thanks for sharing the video link. That's a must watch. I agree. Okay, I've said it before. I'm going to say it again. I wish we had more time. It would be great to be able to stay with you a little longer. We do appreciate your commitment and the time you've taken to be with us today. Like me, I know there's lots of other people online that had questions that time just wouldn't allow us to fit in. But don't worry. We hope that today's session is only the start of our ongoing dialogue. And do please feel free to reach out to ILRI colleagues to continue the conversation after today's event. Now, on that note, time is advancing. It's time to move on to our next Power Hour, which is the Power Hour with Ekta. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening. If you're joining us, you're just joining us right now, you're very welcome wherever you're joining us from. You're welcome to this Marathon Spotlight event, which is taking us on a 13-hour journey around the world. Today, as many are celebrating the International Day of Women and Girls in Science, we're taking the opportunity to celebrate our own fantastic community of women scientists who are leading the way in a wide range of research and scientific innovation. We're meeting colleagues who are breaking barriers and finding new ways to advance the transformation of food, land, and water systems in a climate crisis. If we haven't had the chance to meet before, hello, my name is Fiona Farrell. I lead CG